At 36 years old, with an annual salary of $56,000, Terrence Miller understood his place in the world. It was a place of careful budgets, of brand-name groceries bought only when on sale, of a reliable 2015 Honda CR-V with 110,000 miles on the odometer that he meticulously maintained himself. His life was a spreadsheet of modest inputs and predictable outputs. Then at 9:37 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, his wife Monique handed him a glass of $250 Veuve Clicquot, told him she had just closed a $40 million deal, and then, with the same cool efficiency, informed him that their marriage was over. He was standing in the living room of their $280,000 East Point bungalow, the one he had painted himself 2 summers ago, still holding the empty lunchbox he had just cleaned out for their 6-year-old daughter, Zara. The devastatingly simple sentence hung in the air, more chilling than the expensive champagne in his hand. "I'm leaving you, Terrence," she said, her voice completely devoid of the warmth he had known for a decade. "It's over." The life they had built, or rather, the life he thought they were building together, was catalogued in a series of quiet domestic scenes, each one tagged with a price he had willingly, lovingly paid. He remembered the Saturday morning spent at the kitchen table in their sun-drenched bungalow, the air thick with the smell of the $6-a-pound coffee beans he ground by hand. He would be working on his own continuing education modules for the pension fund, while she, fueled by ambition, would be poring over architectural blueprints. "What's a curtain wall system?" she'd ask, not looking up. And he, setting aside his own work, would explain the non-structural outer covering of a building, the way it keeps the weather out and the occupants in. He was her first and most patient teacher. He remembered the day she decided to get her commercial real estate license. The certification course cost $800, a significant sum on his $56,000 salary. They had to pull it from the savings account they'd earmarked for a new water heater. "It's an investment, Terry," she'd promised, her eyes alight with a fire he hadn't seen before. "It'll pay for itself 100 times over." He believed her. He filled out the online payment form himself, using their joint credit card, and for the next 3 months, he packed his own lunch. Tuna sandwiches on $2.50 store-brand bread to make up the difference in their monthly budget. While she studied, he took on the evenings, picking Zara up from her $400 a month after-school program, making dinner, and reading Zara her favorite stories about brave knights and clever princesses. He saw it all as teamwork, 2 people pulling in the same direction toward a shared future. He had no idea they were in 2 different boats, heading for 2 different horizons. There were the dinners, first at cheap and cheerful places where a plate of pasta was $12, then gradually, at her insistence, at restaurants where the water was bottled and the valet cost more than his lunch. He would wear his best $350 Joseph A. Banks suit, the one he bought for his cousin's wedding, feeling a bit like a child playing dress-up. Monique, however, bloomed in those environments. She started dressing the part, first with a single, elegant $400 Kate Spade handbag he'd bought her for their anniversary, then, as her own small commissions started trickling in, with pieces that he couldn't even put a price on. She learned the language of wealth, dropping names of developers and architects he only read about in the business journals he analyzed for work. He supported her networking even when it meant long evenings alone. He would sit on their worn, comfortable sofa from a big box furniture store, a $1,200 purchase they had financed over 24 months, watching the clock tick past midnight. He'd get a text at 11:45 p.m. "Still with clients. Don't wait up." He would sigh, turn off the television and check the locks, his heart a little hollow, but his pride in her unwavering. He was Terrence Miller, the steady foundation upon which her glittering skyscraper was being built. He thought that was his role, his contribution to their shared success. He didn't realize that foundations by their very nature are meant to be buried and unseen. The normalcy was a carefully constructed facade, and he was the only one who didn't know he was living on a set. He remembered one specific evening, about a year before the end. She was getting ready for a gala, a major real estate awards ceremony. She was wearing a shimmering deep blue gown that had cost, she told him with a casual shrug, about $1.5K, which he knew meant $1,500. He was helping Zara with her homework at the kitchen table, a worksheet on simple addition. Monique swept in, a vision of ambition and expensive perfume. "Terry, I need you to run to the store," she said, not looking at him, but at her reflection in the hall mirror. "Vaughn needs a specific brand of sparkling water for the pre-event toast, a San Pellegrino. Get the big glass bottles." He looked at the clock. It was 7:30 p.m. Zara was in her pajamas. "Can't it just be any water, Mon?" he'd asked, tired from a long day of analyzing municipal bond yields. She turned, and for the first time he saw not his wife, but a stranger. A cold, dismissive stranger. "No, Terrence, it can't just be any water. This is about details. It's about showing you belong. You wouldn't understand." The words and the contempt behind them were a slap. He went to the store. He bought the $5 bottle of water. When he got back, her car was gone. She had left with Vaughn. The water sat on the counter, untouched, for 3 days, a monument to his obsolescence. The betrayal didn't happen in a single night. It was a slow, creeping rot that he had mistaken for growth. The signs had been there for years, accumulating like interest on a debt he didn't know he was accruing. It began with language. She stopped saying we and started saying I. It was my career, my deals, my future. He was an afterthought, a logistical support system. The insults at first were veiled. "Oh, Terry, you're so sweet and simple," she'd say at dinner parties with her new, glossy friends, patting his hand. It was framed as a compliment, but it landed like a judgment. He was the simple, sweet man who managed a pension fund. She was the complex, brilliant woman who was going to build the city. Then came Vaughn. Vaughn was everything Terrence was not. He was slick, wore $6,000 Tom Ford suits as if he were born in them, and drove a $120,000 Porsche Taycan that hummed with the sound of silent, effortless power. He was Monique's business partner, her mentor, her other half, in a language Terrence no longer spoke. Their late-night strategy sessions became more frequent. Terrence would hear their laughter from the living room as he tried to sleep, the low murmur of their voices, a constant, unsettling hum in his own home. One Thursday night, about 6 months before the end, he came home early from a work dinner. His boss had let them out at 8 p.m. As he pulled his modest Honda into the driveway, he saw Vaughn's Porsche parked at the curb. He walked in the front door, expecting to see them at the dining table with blueprints. Instead, they were in the living room, standing close, too close. Monique was laughing, her head tilted back, one hand on Vaughn's arm. Vaughn was looking down at her, a possessive, triumphant smile on his face. They didn't see Terrence in the doorway. "He just doesn't get it, does he?" Vaughn said, his voice a low sneer. "Still thinks this is a team sport." Monique's laugh was brittle. "He's a good man, Vaughn. He's just from another world. My old world." The casual cruelty of it stole the breath from Terrence's lungs. He backed out of the doorway silently, went into the kitchen, and made a lot of noise opening the refrigerator, pretending he had just arrived. When he walked back into the living room, they were 6 feet apart, looking at him with practiced innocence. But he had heard. He knew. The financial slights became more pointed. He managed their joint account, the one his paycheck went into, the one that paid the mortgage and the utilities and Zara's school fees. Her commission checks, she explained, needed to go into a separate business account for tax purposes. He'd see the evidence of her income not in their shared balance, but on her body. A new $8,700 Armani suit for a meeting, a pair of $900 Jimmy Choo heels, a $2,400 Burberry trench coat. When he gently questioned a $5,000 charge on her credit card for a business retreat in Napa, she turned on him. "Are you my husband or my accountant, Terrence?" she snapped. "This is the cost of doing business. It's what it takes to get to the next level, a level you can't even comprehend from your little cubicle, looking at spreadsheets that earn people 3% a year." The most painful scene, the one that replayed in his mind in the dark hours of the night, happened at her firm's holiday party. It was a black tie affair at a hotel in Buckhead, the kind of place where the air itself seemed to cost money. He wore his trusted $350 suit, freshly dry cleaned. He felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach as they walked in. Monique, in a stunning blood-red gown that probably cost more than their mortgage payment, immediately abandoned him for a circle of developers. He stood awkwardly by the bar, nursing a club soda. After an hour, he saw her across the room, talking to Vaughn and a silver-haired man who radiated power. He watched as the man said something, gesturing in Terrence's direction. Monique looked over at him, her own husband, and he saw her mouth form the words, a small, dismissive smile on her face. He couldn't hear them, but he could read her lips perfectly. "Oh, him? That's just Terrence. Just Terrence. Not my husband. Not the man who supported me through it all. Just Terrence." He felt invisible, erased. He left the party without saying goodbye. She didn't come home until 4 a.m., and she never asked where he went. The outrage accumulated in him, not as a raging fire, but as a dense, cold stone in the pit of his stomach. He was being methodically, expertly, and cruelly erased from the life he had helped build. The night of the $40 million deal was the culmination of it all. The celebration was small, just the three of them in the living room that felt more like her stage than his home. Vaughn had arrived shortly after Monique, carrying the expensive champagne. He'd clapped Terrence on the shoulder with a familiarity that felt like a violation. "Big night, big guy. The little woman did it," he'd boomed, his condescension so thick it was suffocating. They popped the cork. The fizz and foam of the $250 champagne filled the glasses. Monique raised hers. "To the Apex Tower," she said, her eyes shining with a feverish light. "And to the future." Vaughn echoed the toast. "To the future." They both looked at Terrence, and he realized with a sickening lurch that he was not included in their toast. He was the past. Monique took a long, slow sip of her champagne, then set the glass down on the coffee table. Her movements were deliberate, theatrical. She looked at him, her face a mask of polite, detached finality. "Terrence," she began, her voice the one she used on difficult clients, "we need to talk." And then came the words he had already heard in his soul for months. "I'm leaving you. It's over." He just stood there, the bubbles in his own glass dying, the cold stem of the flute chilling his fingers. He felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that comes after a catastrophic explosion. The world had ended, but he was still standing. Vaughn, ever the efficient operator, cleared his throat. "We, thought it would be best to handle this cleanly for everyone's sake." He reached into his sleek $4,000 leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. He slid it across the coffee table. It landed next to a stack of Zara's picture books. "These are the separation papers. Our attorney drafted them. We've been very generous." Terrence stared at the folder. The betrayal was no longer a creeping suspicion. It was a notarized, multi-page document. They hadn't just decided this tonight. This had been planned, orchestrated. The party, the champagne, this conversation, it was all a script. And he was the only one who hadn't been given his lines. You "You had these drawn up already?" he managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. Monique wouldn't meet his eyes. She was examining her perfectly manicured nails. "It's better this way, Terry. No mess. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few weeks until my new condo in Buckhead is ready. You can stay here for now, for Zara's sake. We'll figure out the rest later." For Zara's sake, the words were a knife. He looked around the room he had painted, the floor he had refinished, the life he had built. He saw Zara's little pink backpack by the front door, a bright splash of color in the suddenly gray world. She always left it there, ready for the next day. A little voice in his head, Zara's voice from a few weeks ago, echoed in the silence. "I leave my backpack here so Daddy comes back for it, if he ever goes away." His heart cracked. "Get out," he said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of 1,000 small humiliations. Monique looked up, surprised. "What?" "Get out of my house," he repeated, his voice stronger now. "Both of you." Vaughn smirked. "Now listen here, buddy." "Out." Terrence's voice didn't waver. He wasn't yelling. He was just done. He was no longer the foundation. He was the man who owned the land. And he was evicting his tenants. For the first time that night, Monique looked uncertain. She saw something in his eyes she didn't recognize, a line being drawn. She picked up her $400 handbag. Vaughn grabbed his briefcase, and they left. The click of the front door closing was the loudest sound he had ever heard. He stood alone in the silence. The folder of his life's demolition sitting on the table. A single, heartbreakingly pink backpack standing guard by the door. The drive was a blur. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay in that house, a museum of a life that had just been declared extinct. He ended up on the south side of the city, pulling into the parking lot of a grim, 24-hour diner called The Majestic, its sign missing the J. The irony was not lost on him. He slid into a cracked red vinyl booth under the flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled of stale coffee and grease. It was a world away from the Champagne and Buckhead Towers. It was real. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind face took his order. "Coffee, black," he said. He sat there for a long time, the hot, bitter liquid doing nothing to warm the block of ice in his chest. Finally, at 1:17 a.m., he reached for the manila folder Vaughn had so casually tossed onto his coffee table. His hands trembled slightly as he untied the string closure. The first document was a formal separation agreement. His eyes scanned the legalese, the cold, typed words carving up a decade of his life into assets and liabilities. He would get the Honda. She would get her BMW 4 Series, the one she'd bought 6 months ago for $58,000. He would get to stay in the house for now, but would have to buy out her half of the equity, a figure they had generously appraised at a peak market value that was impossibly out of his reach. It was all designed for one purpose, to get him out of the way as quickly and cheaply as possible. He flipped through the pages: financial disclosures, custody agreements, waivers of future claims. Then he saw it. Tucked at the back of the packet, stapled to a formal letter from a downtown law firm, was an invoice. He looked at the date on the invoice for legal services rendered. It was dated 3 weeks prior. 3 weeks. While he was making Zara's lunches, while he was balancing their checkbook, while he was telling his co-workers how proud he was of his wife's ambition, she and Vaughn were in a lawyer's office, drafting the blueprint of his eviction. The discovery was not a single, shocking moment, but a slow, sickening descent into the true depths of their deception. The champagne celebration wasn't a spontaneous moment of triumph that led to a difficult conversation. It was the final, choreographed scene of a play that had been in rehearsal for weeks. He felt a wave of nausea. He leaned his head against the cool glass of the diner window, the city lights outside blurring into a meaningless smear. The cold stone in his stomach had found its name: betrayal. It was absolute. He sat in that booth for what felt like an eternity, the world outside reduced to the occasional passing of headlights. He didn't call anyone. He didn't text. He didn't rage or weep. He just sat in the profound, echoing silence of his own demolition. This was his period of playing dumb, but it wasn't an act for anyone else's benefit. It was a necessary state of shock, a mental and emotional retreat. While his system absorbed the full impact of the blow, he was feigning normalcy to himself, pretending he could just sip coffee and process the fact that his entire world had been a lie. He replayed every cruel word, every dismissive gesture from the past year, Monique's sneer about his little cubicle, Vaughn's condescending pats on the shoulder, her words on the phone to some vendor, "Don't worry about my husband, he's not involved in the financials." Each memory was a piece of evidence he had subconsciously filed away, and now, under the harsh light of the diner, he was finally assembling the case. The verdict was undeniable. He had been a fool, a loving, supportive, trusting fool, and they had exploited that trust with a ruthless, surgical precision. He thought about Zara. He imagined her waking up in the morning, padding out to the living room, and seeing her pink backpack still by the door. He pictured her small, hopeful face. She would think he was coming back. That single thought was a clean, sharp pain that cut through the numb shock. This wasn't just about him and Monique. It was about the little girl who believed her backpack was a magic talisman that could keep her family whole. A quiet, cold anger began to replace the hollow ache in his chest. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a man scorned. It was the slow-burning, intensely focused anger of a man who had been underestimated. They thought he was just Terrence. Simple, sweet, harmless Terrence. They had made a critical mistake. The shift happened at 3:28 a.m. It wasn't a lightning bolt, but a quiet click, like a gear engaging in a complex machine. He was staring into the dregs of his fifth cup of coffee when a single word from Monique's triumphant announcement echoed in his mind. Apex. The Apex Tower. The $40 million deal. A new mixed-use development in Buckhead. He sat up a little straighter. His mind, the one Monique had dismissed as too simple to comprehend her world, began to work. He was an investment analyst for the Tri-State Mechanics Pension Fund. His job was to analyze and manage long-term, stable investments. Commercial real estate developments were a big part of their portfolio. He pulled his work laptop, a functional but aging $900 Dell, from his worn leather satchel. He paid the tired waitress for his coffee and left a $20 tip, an act of defiant normalcy. He drove not to a hotel but to his office building downtown. The parking garage was empty and cavernous. His keycard led him into the silent, tomb-like office. The only sound was the hum of the servers. He sat down in his cubicle, the one Monique had so derisively pictured, and logged in. He navigated to the fund's active investment pipeline. He typed Apex into the search bar, and there it was. Project name, Apex Tower, Buckhead. Developer, Phoenix Development Group. Capital broker, MV Consulting, Monique Vaughn Consulting. His breath caught in his throat. He clicked open the file. He scrolled past the architectural renderings, the market analyses, the zoning permits. He went straight to the capital stack, the breakdown of where the money was coming from. And he saw it. Tri-State Mechanics Pension Fund. Allocation, $40 million. It was their deal. His fund was the $40 million deal. He felt a strange, icy calm. He kept digging. He was the analyst assigned to this file. It had come across his desk 2 months ago. It was a solid project, a good fit for their long-term growth strategy. He had done the due diligence. He had written the investment memo. He had recommended it for approval to the investment committee. His recommendation was what had pushed it over the finish line. The irony was a physical blow. He had, unknowingly, personally greenlit the very deal that had financed his own destruction. But then he scrolled further, down to the final commitment documents. These were the binding legal papers that, once signed, would release the funds. He opened the PDF of the commitment letter. It was a standard 20-page document filled with dense legal language. He scrolled to the last page, the signature page. He saw the line for the developer. He saw the line for Monique's firm, MV Consulting, where she had already signed her name in a flamboyant, confident script. And then he saw the final signature line, for Tri-State Mechanics Pension Fund, by Terrence Miller, Investment Analyst, Commercial Real Estate Division Authorized Signatory, his name, his title, and the two most important words in his entire professional life, Authorized Signatory. He leaned back in his squeaking standard-issue office chair. He was the gatekeeper. The committee could approve. The lawyers could draft. But until he, Terrence Miller, personally put his pen to that paper, not a single dollar of that $40 million would move. And because he was the analyst who had managed the file from its inception, the fund's bylaws were clear. For continuity and accountability, there could be no substitute signatory without restarting the entire committee approval process, a process that would take months. He was the only one. They didn't know. Monique and Vaughn, in all their arrogant, meticulous planning, had overlooked the most important detail. They saw him as the domestic help, the simpleton who packed lunches and couldn't understand their brilliant world. They never for a second considered that his little cubicle might be the very control tower from which their $40 million rocket was set to launch. The strategic planning began. He wasn't thinking about revenge. Revenge was messy, emotional. This was about accountability. This was about the rules. He opened a new document. He started looking up the pension fund's code of conduct and ethics policies. He found the section he was looking for, Section 12B, Conflict of Interest. It was beautifully, unambiguously clear. Any employee who has a personal or financial relationship with a party in a transaction must immediately disclose it and recuse themselves from the decision-making process. Failure to do so was grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. His marriage to Monique was a conflict of interest, and now, as of last night, the dissolution of that marriage was an even more profound, more complex conflict. He started drafting an email. He chose his words with the same care and precision he used when analyzing a balance sheet. He was not emotional. He was not accusatory. He was simply a professional, following protocol. He cited the project name, the allocation amount, and the relevant parties. He stated, as a matter of fact, his personal relationship with the principal of MV Consulting. He then stated, as a matter of fact, that this relationship had been irreparably severed, making his continued involvement in the project untenable. He formally recused himself, and then he added the masterstroke. Given the sudden and unforeseen nature of this conflict, and to protect the integrity of the fund and its members, I recommend the board place an immediate freeze on the capital commitment to the Apex Tower project pending a full and transparent ethics review of the brokerage and due diligence process. He attached a copy of the pension fund's ethics bylaws. He compiled it all into a single, devastatingly professional email. He addressed it to the entire investment committee, the head of the legal department, and the chairman of the board. He looked at the clock. It was 5:45 a.m. The sun would be up soon. At 6:12 a.m., Terrence Miller, a man earning $56,000 a year, took a sip of his now cold office coffee, took a deep breath, and hit send. The email, a digital torpedo of unimpeachable professionalism, shot out into the pre-dawn quiet of the corporate world. It landed silently in 13 inboxes, a ticking time bomb of consequences. He felt no glee, no triumphant surge of adrenaline. He simply felt the quiet, grim satisfaction of a balanced ledger. He had followed the rules. He had done his job. The rest was just math. He stood up, stretched, and walked over to the large windows that overlooked the awakening city of Atlanta. The sky to the east was turning a soft, bruised purple. He watched the first rays of sunlight begin to illuminate the glass towers of downtown and, further north, the gleaming skyscrapers of Buckhead. Somewhere up there, in a suite at a five-star hotel, Monique was probably sleeping the deep, satisfied sleep of a victor. She had no idea that the world she had woken up to was fundamentally different from the one she had gone to sleep in. She had no idea that her greatest triumph was about to become her most public failure. The first reply came at 6:47 a.m. It was from Arthur Vance, the chairman of the pension fund, a stern, old-school financier who valued integrity above all else. The email was one word: acknowledged. Terrence knew what that word meant. It meant the gears of the great, implacable machine of corporate governance were beginning to turn. At 7:15 a.m., an automated notification popped up on his screen. It was a calendar invitation for 8 a.m. Title: Urgent Apex Project Review. The attendees were the entire senior leadership of the fund. At 7:30 a.m., his desk phone rang. It was the fund's general counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria Flores. "Terrence," she said, her voice all business. "Walk me through this. Leave nothing out." For the next 20 minutes, he did just that. He told her about his marriage, his support of Monique's career, the events of the previous night. He didn't editorialize. He just stated the facts. When he was done, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Thank you for your integrity, Mr. Miller," she finally said. "You did the right thing. We'll handle it from here. Do not, under any circumstances, communicate with MV Consulting or any party related to the Apex project. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," Terrence said. Meanwhile, at 9:05 a.m., in a sleek, glass-walled office in the heart of Buckhead, Monique and Vaughn were toasting with mimosas. They had been celebrating since last night. The $40 million funding was the final piece of the puzzle. It legitimized their new firm, put them on the map, and personally netted them a combined commission of over $2 million. Monique was wearing her $8,700 Armani power suit, the one she called her closing armor. She felt invincible. "Any minute now," Vaughn said, checking his $30,000 Patek Philippe watch. "The executed commitment letter should be here any minute. Then we call the developer and officially break ground." Right on cue, the receptionist buzzed. "A courier is here for you, Ms. Roberts." Monique smiled at Vaughn, a wide, triumphant smile. "This is it," she whispered. She strode out to the reception area and signed for the large, crisp envelope bearing the Tri-State Mechanics Pension Fund logo. She carried it back to her office, like a trophy. "Let's frame this," she said to Vaughn, her voice giddy. She sat down at her massive $15,000 polished oak desk and used a silver letter opener to slice the envelope open. She pulled out the document inside. But it wasn't the 20-page commitment letter she was expecting. It was a single sheet of paper, official letterhead. She began to read. "Dear Ms. Roberts and Mr. Vaughn," she read aloud, her voice still buoyant. "This letter serves as formal notification that—" Her voice trailed off. Her smile faltered. Vaughn leaned forward. "What is it?" Monique's face, which had been glowing with triumph, was rapidly draining of color. She continued reading, her voice now a stunned, hollow whisper. Pursuant to an internal ethics review, all capital commitments from the Tri-State Mechanics Pension Fund related to the Apex Tower project are hereby frozen, effective immediately. Frozen. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. What? Vaughn snatched the letter from her hand. He read it, his eyes darting across the page. What the hell is this? An ethics review? What ethics review? Monique was staring at the bottom of the letter, at the name typed below the signature of the fund's general counsel, the name of the person to whom all inquiries should be directed. For additional information, please contact our legal department or the primary analyst for this file. She read the name aloud, but it came out as a choked gasp. Terrence Miller. Vaughn looked up from the letter, his face a mask of disbelief which quickly contorted into rage. Terrence? You're Terrence? What does he have to do with this? But Monique wasn't listening. She was connecting the dots with horrifying speed. His job, his fund, the deal, his name on the internal documents she'd never bothered to read. Her words from last night. I outgrew you. His quiet, unnerving calm as he told them to get out. It all clicked into place. He knew he had the power, and he had just used it. She felt a cold dread spread through her, a dread that had nothing to do with the $40 million deal and everything to do with the man she had so casually, so cruelly underestimated. The mimosa glass slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the polished concrete floor. The party was officially over. The consequences did not just cascade, they avalanched. The single professional email sent by Terrence Miller at 6:12 a.m. triggered a chain reaction of catastrophic failure for Monique and Vaughn, each downfall a direct and measurable consequence of their own actions. The first call came at 9:23 a.m., just moments after the mimosa glass shattered. It was from Robert Chen, the CEO of Phoenix Development Group, the primary developer of the Apex Tower. His voice, usually smooth and collegial, was like ice. Monique, I just got a call from Arthur Vance at Tri-State. He told me the funding is frozen. What the hell is going on? You told me this was a done deal. You gave me your word. Monique, still in shock, stammered. Robert, it's a misunderstanding. A clerical error. I can fix it. Chen was having none of it. You have until noon to fix it, he snarled. If that $40 million isn't secured, the entire capital stack collapses. My other investors will walk. This project will die, and I will hold your firm, MV Consulting, personally and financially liable for every penny. Our contract has a performance clause, Monique. I suggest you read it. You just cost me a potential $100 million project, and I promise you, my lawyers are more expensive than yours. The line went dead. Monique stared at her phone. Her projected $1.2 million commission on the deal had not only vanished, but it had been replaced by the threat of a lawsuit that could bankrupt her firm 10 times over. Next, Vaughn turned on her. The partnership that had seemed so powerful and alluring in the lamplight of expensive restaurants turned ugly under the harsh glare of failure. What did you do? He hissed, his face pale and sweaty. You said you had him under control. You said he was a nobody, a simple little man. I thought he was, Monique cried, her voice cracking. How was I supposed to know he was the one signing the check? That's your job, Vaughn roared, kicking the leg of his own $7,000 designer chair. Due diligence. You were so focused on your little psychodrama, you didn't do basic due diligence on the most important investor in the deal. Did you know his name was on the file? No, she admitted in a small voice. Vaughn laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Unbelievable. You blew up our entire company because you were too arrogant to read the paperwork. The pension fund's ethics review was not the quiet internal affair Monique had hoped for. It was a full-scale forensic investigation. They didn't just look at Terrence's conflict of interest. They used it as a reason to scrutinize the entire deal MV Consulting had put together. They found that Vaughn, in his haste to close the deal, had cut corners. He had used inflated property value projections and had not adequately disclosed risks in the market analysis. These were not illegalities, but they were the kind of professional sloppiness that a conservative, risk-averse pension fund abhorred. The fund's trust in MV Consulting was irrevocably broken. By 4 p.m. that day, they had formally withdrawn their interest in the Apex Tower project, not just frozen it. The $40 million was gone for good. The news hit the Atlanta business journals the next morning. $40 million Buckhead Tower deal collapses amid ethics probe. The article didn't name Terrence, but it named MV Consulting as the brokerage at the center of the controversy. Monique's phone, which had once been filled with calls from eager clients and fawning developers, went silent. Her professional reputation, the thing she had sacrificed her marriage for, was destroyed overnight. The final, most personal consequence came a week later. Vaughn, in a desperate move to save his own skin and what was left of the firm, called an emergency partnership meeting. He invoked a clause in their operating agreement, a dense paragraph on page 47, that Monique had never bothered to read closely. It was a key person risk clause, allowing one partner to force a buyout of the other in the event of gross negligence that caused material harm to the firm. He presented the case. Her failure to disclose her relationship with a key decision-maker at the fund constituted gross negligence. The collapse of the Apex deal was the material harm. He was pushing her out. He offered her a paltry sum for her stake in the company, less than the cost of her BMW. "Take it, Monique," he said, his voice cold and devoid of any of the charm he once used on her. "Or I'll see you in court for years. Your choice." She was ruined, and her partner, the man she had betrayed her husband for, was the one holding the axe. She signed the papers, her flamboyant signature now small and shaky. She was left with a leased BMW she could no longer afford, a closet full of expensive suits that now felt like a costume, and the crushing weight of her own choices. 2 years passed. The world kept turning, and life, as it always does, found a new rhythm. Terrence Miller no longer lived in the East Point bungalow. He had agreed to let Monique sell it, taking his half of the equity, a modest sum that he put directly into a trust for Zara's future education. He now lived in a clean, bright, 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood with excellent public schools. The rent was $1,600 a month, a comfortable figure for his new salary. After the Apex Tower incident, the board of the pension fund, impressed with his integrity and meticulous attention to detail, had offered him a promotion. He moved from analysis to oversight, a new role in the compliance department. He was now one of the people who reviewed deals for potential conflicts of interest, a gatekeeper in a more formal sense. It was a lateral move in terms of glamour, but a significant step up in responsibility and pay, bringing his annual salary to a comfortable $85,000. His new apartment was not filled with designer furniture or expensive art. Its walls were decorated with the vibrant, joyful, and ever-expanding gallery of Zara's creations. There were paintings of misshapen rainbows, clay sculptures of their family cat, and dozens of drawings. The space was filled with the authentic love of a father and daughter building a new life together. The glass towers of Buckhead, once a symbol of a world he couldn't reach, now just seemed like distant, cold structures on the skyline. His world was here, in this cozy apartment, filled with the scent of the simple, delicious meals he cooked every night and the sound of Zara's laughter. It was a Sunday morning. Sunlight, warm and golden, streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Terrence was sitting on a small stool, and Zara, now 8, stood between his knees. He was braiding her hair, his large, gentle fingers expertly weaving the strands, his movements practiced and sure. The colorful beads she'd picked out clicked softly with each pass. This was their Sunday ritual, a quiet time of connection and care. "Daddy," Zara said, her voice full of the unfiltered honesty of childhood, "remember when Mommy lived with us?" Terrence's hands didn't pause. "I do, sweet pea." "Her hair was always so pointy," Zara said, trying to find the right word. "And she smelled like grown-up flowers." Terrence smiled. "She did? Your hair is soft," Zara continued, reaching up to pat his neat, short locks. "And you smell like pancakes." He chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." She handed him a new drawing. It was a portrait of the two of them. She had used a brown crayon for their skin, a detail she was always very specific about. The figures were simple stick people, but they were unmistakably them. He had his short locks, and she had her braids with the colorful beads at the end. Below the drawing, in her careful, developing handwriting, she had written, "My family. Just us is a lot." His heart swelled with a love so profound it almost hurt. This was true wealth. Not a $40 million deal, but a child's drawing on a sunlit Sunday morning. This was the portfolio that truly mattered. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced over at it. A text from a number he didn't have saved, but he knew who it was. Monique. It was the first time she had reached out in over a year. The message was simple. 4 words, stripped of all her former arrogance. "Can we talk, please?" He looked at the message. He felt no anger, no bitterness, no desire for further revenge. He felt only a distant, quiet pity for the woman who had traded a universe of love for a handful of dust. He had forgiven her long ago, not for her sake, but for his own. Forgiveness was the final asset he had to divest to be truly free. He set his phone back down on the counter, screen down, without replying. He finished the last braid, securing it with a bright yellow bead. "All done, my love," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Now how about those pancakes?" Zara squealed with delight, and the sound echoed through their small, happy home. True value isn't found in the towering heights of ambition or the cold, hard numbers of a deal. It's not measured in dollars or square feet. True wealth is built slowly, quietly, in the spaces between people. It's in the sacrifices made in love, the promises kept, and the quiet integrity you hold on to when no one is watching. Terrence learned that you can lose a house, a marriage, and a life you thought you knew, and still come out richer on the other side. Because in the end, the only deals that truly matter are the ones you make with your own heart, and the only towers worth building are the ones founded on love, truth, and the joyful laughter of a child. What do you think is the most valuable thing in a person's life? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing your stories and your wisdom. And if you found this story inspiring, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of character. We have a new story for you every week. You won't want to miss what's coming next.